But nonetheless, we'll certainly have a very brief overview of what is test management with Jira and Xray. We'll be looking at migrating test cases from other tools because this is something that usually people are coming from other tool sets and they really want to see how we can facilitate their job in migrating these test cases into Xray. We'll look at requirements and automated test results traceability, which is always something that people are looking for, the traceability between all the issues, be it from the bug all the way up to the requirement itself. And then finalize and look at best practices and how to scale your software testing with Jira. So without further ado, and for those of you who do not know anything about Xray, well, Xray is a test management application for Jira. It does not reside outside the Jira ecosystem, and we have it available for cloud, server, and data center. Today, we'll be demoing this in the server version. Server is identical to the data center in terms of features and look and feel. Cloud, since Jira Cloud is also slightly different in terms of user interface or user experience. There you will see some differences, but nonetheless, the underlying functionality is basically the same. It's mainly used for test coverage visibility. We do provide you with complete traceability. We support both manual and automated tests. Even though we'll look at a manual test, we'll be concentrating most of our demo in the automated section. It is certainly used for organizing and planning your tests, and you can certainly also execute the tests directly from within Xray, especially if they are manual tests. If they are automated tests, it is usual for them to be triggered and be executed from an external platform or initiated by a CI/CD environment. You can report or create defects directly within Xray, and we support a full REST API just in case you need to integrate, and this is especially useful for automation, if you need to integrate with external solutions. Now, even though we do provide a full REST API, we also provide plugins for most of the most common CI/CD tools such as Jenkins, Bamboo, Circle CI. So this kind of shields you from using the REST API, which nonetheless is very simple to use. So you can certainly go that way also. Okay. When Xray installs, or I should say when your Jira administrator installs Xray, it will set up Xray issue types for test specification, for organization, for planning, and for execution. Now, the great thing about this is that all of these, with the exception of test repository and test run, are also Jira issues, which means that you get all the advantages of using Jira issues themselves, such as permission controls, implementation of workflows that are specific to how your company works or how your processes are implemented, creating custom fields or even customizing the screens. And well, you can see them here. One other great thing here is that you can actually use other third-party applications to interact directly with these Xray issue types, and that gives you full control over what you're doing within Jira. So it's not a standalone, it's not a side-loaded application. It is an application fully integrated into the Jira ecosystem and makes full use of those issues as well. Sorry. Now, looking at your typical quality assurance process, you write your test specifications. Especially if you're in larger companies or in large projects and with hundreds, if not thousands or hundreds of thousands of tests, you organize your tests. You certainly go ahead and plan the execution of these tests, and then you can execute them. Now, Xray does provide you a way in which you can do all of these from within Xray. You can also bypass step 2 and 3 if you want, where you'd carry out what we call ad hoc executions. Nonetheless, I believe that this is the typical way where you write, you organize, you plan the execution of the test, and then you go ahead and run those tests. Now, for demoing purposes, I have everything is running in my VM machine. locally, I have set up a project with a hypothetical online bookshop. It has several requirements, or if we're looking at the agile world, we can think of them as stories. And I will have one story, which is the user must be able to manage the shopping cart, to which I've already linked a couple of generic and structured tests. They are automated tests. I'll also show you a manual test just in case you want to see this and you're unfamiliar with this. Look at previous videos, but nonetheless, I'll just show you one of the manual tests, which also has a precondition. And I'll also be linking in a BDD type of test or Gherkin language defined test, or if you want a cucumber for traditional reasons. And we'll be executing both BDD and generic tests during this demo. So if I switch over to my Xray instance here, hopefully you're still seeing this. I see that here I have my Scrum board. You can see that the Scrum board has been enhanced with a few custom fields from Xray, such as information regarding the requirement status coverage. And out of the box, we provide 5, but nonetheless, I'll just show you the 4 that are here. Okay, meaning that all of the tests have passed. Not okay, meaning that at least one of the tests has failed. Not run means that at least one of the tests has not been executed yet. And uncovered, meaning we have a specific requirement or story, but this one has no tests that are covering. This is useful to know also. Maybe you want this, but nonetheless, this is also useful. So this is the story that we'll be looking at. Let me just open this up in a different browser tab. And here we see that I have this specific story. Sorry, I did not put in a description here, but we see that we already have the overall requirement status for the latest execution. This is what I have configured within Xray itself. And we do see that we have 1 test that has passed and 2 that have failed. If we scroll down a bit, and this is what Xray adds when you configure Jira, or I should say when you configure Xray to treat this specific issue type story as an issue to be treated by or covered by tests. We do see a test coverage pane here where I see a couple of stories, well, 3 stories in total, and the overall requirement status is not okay because at least one of the tests has failed. In this case, we have 2 tests that failed. I could also, if I wanted, check this against a specific fixed version or maybe a different environment. For example, if I chose Firefox here, I'd see that overall this is not run. And why? Because I have 1 test that passed for the latest execution when I specifically stated that I'm testing the Firefox environment. You can create your own test environments, by the way. And this is why I have the not run status. At least one of the tests has not been executed yet. So let me switch this back into something a bit more colorful here. Put all environments. And what I did state is that I will be also adding a manual test case and another automated test. By the way, these are all generic unstructured tests, which are automated or run automatically by an external system. And if I want to run or include additional tests that cover this particular test case requirement, I will just, since I preceded everything with demo, I'm just going to add the manual one, and here I'll also add the BDD test. I know I'm not sick. So once I've added these tests, I do see that both the manual test that I just added, as well, here it is, the manual test as well as the BDD test, they are also showing the latest execution for this type of test, and both of them have failed. We'll be passing a couple of these as we go along. Let me just open to show you the test case specification for all these types of tests. So let me just open these 3. And this way we can see that, for example, for a manual test case, and once again, and I always rephrase this when I'm speaking about Xray, this is an Xray issue. It is a test specification or a test case, and you can see that it is a Jira issue, which means you can assign it to people. You can create your own workflows. You can create your own custom components and so forth. So this is very worthwhile. Well, in this case, I'm using the latest version of Jira server, of Xray server. And I do see that it is a manual test case specification. I do see 3 test steps that the testers should follow while they're carrying out their tests. And it is also linked to a precondition. And in the past, I did execute this and I failed it. Okay, if this is so, for those of you who are unfamiliar with manual test case specification within Xray, it's fairly simple. I actually used copy and paste directly from the clipboard in order to import these test steps directly from Excel. If we look at a BDD type of test, now this is for historical reasons, we call this a cucumber type of test. We do see that I have a scenario outline where I have my gherkin steps. Remember that these gherkin steps must have matching file code when the feature file exported. The executable must have the matching steps so that your test case specification person can add these instructions in, and the only thing that has to be guaranteed is that in fact there is a matching executable statement from the other side. And if we scroll down, we do see that we've had also an execution in the past, which it failed. By the way, it failed because I'm provoking an error in this case, but not in the actual code, in the specification. This is just adding items to my shopping cart. If I have 3 items and I add another 4, I should get 7 and not 0. This is why this test is failing, and we can even correct that later on. And if we look at what is mostly used for automated tests, which is the generic unstructured test, here it follows the same pattern. All our test issues or all our test case specifications follow the same pattern. What changes here is the test details. It is a generic type of test. We do have a unique definition that has to be identified uniquely a test case specification. Why is this necessary? When you run your automated tests and the results are pushed into Xray, Xray will look for this unique identifier. If it finds it, it will add the additional execution, as you can see here too, to this list of executions. You can also have Xray creating this specific test case specification because the specification itself is in your automation framework. So what you're doing here is managing the results of these tests. What it needs is a unique identifier. So if Xray does not find a unique identifier for the results that it is receiving, it will and it can create automatically the test for you. So I didn't create this test from scratch. I just had my automation framework running the tests, pushing the results into Xray, and Xray created this for me. The second time I ran it, it already found the test and it placed the execution there for me. Okay, so these are the types of tests that you can have. One thing that is important to also state, if I go back to the BDD type of test, while in the generic and structured test, everything is defined within your automation framework. For BDD, you can have Xray as your master repository for your test case specification. So this means that and I will show you later on. This means that I can change my test case specification here, and when my automation solution or framework is about to execute the tests, it will pull the specification from Xray, it will execute the code, and it will push back the results. For BDD, you can also have the master repository elsewhere. It's just a matter of configuring differently your pipeline so that it reflects the scenario that you want. Okay, so let me go back to the presentation here. One thing that I mentioned, I did state that I imported those tests by using copy paste. Since many people are coming from other tool sets or migrating or I would say evolving into using Xray, We also provide a couple of toolkits to simplify your life in migrating your test cases from the other solutions. We have plugins for HP Quality or Quality Center or Micro Focus Quality Center. We also have it for Zephyr. These are tools that I cannot demonstrate for you because I do not have Quality Center nor Zephyr installed. But if time permits, I can certainly show you the test case importer for the generic or the remaining test steps, test cases. But even if you do not have either ALM or Zephyr and you're migrating from another one, our test case importer is very powerful. It is a wizard that will guide you through the steps that you need to carry out. We support both CSV and JSON files when importing test cases from other tool sets or even from your Excel files. We have many customers who just use Excel files. All they have to do in this case is convert them into CSV, and then you can import that directly into Xray. And Xray has a wizard that will guide you through each one of the steps that you have to take, which field maps onto which Jira field, or I should say which column maps onto which Jira field, and which column maps onto Xray fields. And basically that's it. It will create it for you, and I can show also that a bit later. Now, once you have your tests inserted or created within Xray, then you are ready to start all the fun or the work. And the first thing that you should consider is, of course, organizing your test sets, your test cases. You can certainly do this by using test sets. They are flat, I can consider them flat files. They are Jira issues where you link your tests to. And in this case, a test case can belong to 0 or more test sets. We also provide you with a hierarchical view, or what we call a test repository, in which case you create the folder structure that you want. But in this case, a test case can only belong to a single node or a single folder on this tree. Before I even show you this and go on to executing a couple of automated tests, let me show, because I've spoken about test cases, preconditions, now test sets. Soon we'll be looking at test plans and test executions. So let me show you how everything fits together within Xray, all these issues. So if I start off with a very simple example here, where I have a project with only 9 test cases. All these test cases will be automatically inserted or belong in my test repository, regardless if I want to organize them or not. They will just be in what we consider the root folder. You can also organize your tests using what we call test sets. These are basically used for grouping purposes. So when I inserted those 2 tests, if I had into that requirement I was testing, the manual and the BDD, if I had 100 tests, I'd have to do it one by one, which is kind of cumbersome, and I'd probably forget or make some errors. So it's probably easier if I group those into a test set or have them in a specific directory. And this is what Xray provides you with for organizational purposes. Now, let's just say I want to go ahead and test a couple of these tests. Execute a couple of these tests. What is usually done, as I stated in the beginning, you can go through a planning phase. You could run these ad hoc, but what is typically done, you create or use an existing test plan issue. It is an Xray issue type, also a Jira issue. And in this case, all you have to do is just link those tests to the specific plan. Having this plan, you can create as many plans as you want per project, per sprint, if you're still using waterfall or traditional models in the testing phase. This is really up to you. And even within the test plan, you can actually group your tests within specific directories, and we'll see also that. And this is what Xray provides you for test planning purposes. Now, when you want to go ahead and run the tests, you need to create a test execution. In this case, I created the test execution for the first 2 test cases. Once your tester goes or your automation system runs these tests, a test run is created where it maintains all the test run data as well as the results. And this is why when I started filtering it, it is fairly quick because it uses the metrics within these test runs. And you do the same thing for the other tests. Now, in this case, I've created several executions just to show you that you can create as many executions as you want. But I could have simply put everything into a single execution. Here I've created three. Maybe they are user A, user B, user C would be responsible for these executions in this, or maybe priority A, priority B, priority C, or components. It is really up to you, but it's nice to know that you also have this ability to create as many executions as you want. So taking all this in mind and going back into my instance, and please, if you have any questions regarding this type of organization, do let me know. So going back into presentation here, and we'll just choose this tab here. I'm going to go into the repository. Now, now in the repository, I've already opted to group the tests according to this structure, which I found interesting at the time. I can switch to flat view and see all the tests, but grouped according to these directory structures. And the tests that I will be demoing are these ones. So let me just include these last two ones that I added to the story into a specific plan. The test repository is what I call a launch pad into many features that we have within Xray. For example, from here, I could create a test set. I can add these two tests to a specific test set. I can create a test plan with just these two or add them to another one. Or if I want to bypass all that together, I can create an execution right away. So this is how easy it is to create an execution. In this case, I'm adding them to a specific plan, which I will be using in my automation or CI/CD environment. So it will be plan 98. So I've added these to the plan, and I'm not creating a new one simply for the fact what I've already stated. I've already configured this plan to save a bit of time in my Jenkins environment, which is what I'll be using for demoing purposes. Now, if I go back to if I move along to the test plan board, I did state that the test plan is a Jira issue. This does not look like a Jira issue. We'll get to that in just a moment because this is just a different view of that Jira issue or that test plan issue. As you can see, I can also group the tests that I have within this test plan according to any directory structure that I want. If I want to even create this directory structure, otherwise it would all be here in the orphan directory. But let's have a look at this specific. Oh, by the way, this view is great because I can also switch to flat view. And besides seeing the overall progress, I also see the progress of the tests, but grouped to the directory structures that I've defined. This is we found that this is very useful also. So let me go to the issue itself. I'm looking at the same thing, but here I'm seeing the issue. So I could have someone responsible for defining the test, someone responsible for planning the tests, and someone responsible for executing the tests. What do I see here? I do see that this is the overall progress, the latest execution. I also see that I have these 5 tests which I included. This one's fine to demonstrate. I do see that this particular test has 2 executions. Maybe this test has had hundreds of executions, but within the scope of this test plan, it was executed only twice. And this is what you see because I'm looking at this within the plan itself. So and you also get all the executions that have taken place in the context of the demo. So if I go back to the test plan board here, and we'll go ahead and run one of the manual tests, not the manual test, this is the automation session. So I'll be running maybe the robot and the BDD type of test. So let me go ahead and run robot. Now, for that I have to log in. There we go. And I have a couple of jobs set up here within my Jenkins environment. If I look at my job that is specific to robot, I'm going to look and to the configuration here. And remember that Xray, you can interact with Xray by using the REST API or directly the plugins that we provide for a couple of CI/CD environments. In this case, I'm using Jenkins. Here I'm checking out, this is the pipeline that I have, I'm checking out everything from my Git repository, also local. I'm running robot against those files, and then I'm pushing the results. This is already a plugin. I'm pushing the results back to Xray. I'm specifying the project that I'm using. This is why I opted to include that in those tests in a specific test plan, because I had already configured that. Otherwise, I'd have to change. And I'm also specifying a few other things, such as the fixed version, the test environment. I'm not specifying a test execution key, so it will be created automatically for me. And I'm using the robot XML. Now we do provide, and I will see this in just a little while, we do provide the ability for you to use quite a number of different formats. And if I run this test here, and let me just do this, and I apologize, I'm going to do this to minimize, because I need this at least, because I want to make sure that I configured everything and everything is running here, because I'm using robot with Selenium, so a browser should pop up here. I'm just testing our own Xray site, looking for a few links that I'm interested here. We see everything is running. Automation and Selenium brought up that, and it pushed the result back into Xray. So if I look at the results here and look at the console output, I will see that everything passed, all my tests passed. I already know what these stand for, so I know that it created a new execution, which is 226 in this case. So if I go back to my my plan, and I could look at that execution for several ways. I'm just going to go directly into the issue, the test plan issue. And here I see that the 226 plan execution was created. So that's how easy it was to have an execution created, pass the results into Xray, and have Xray treat this. If I look at this specific execution, I will see that I only had one test, by the way, one test within it, and I can see the execution details. It's not going to execute because I could close this, but nonetheless, I'm just going to look at the executions here, and I do see exactly, first of all, the unique identifier that identifies this. Xray creates this automatically. There are rules that are specified in the documentation for creating these unique identifiers, and I get the results that were pushed back from Xray. So all of a sudden, if I go back into my plan board, and this is one of the tests that was failing, well, let me go here. And if I check against let me check firm this one, I will see that this particular test has now passed. Okay, let me also run for you a BDD type of test, which I have, well, for this, let me do this. Let me correct it, because this test, we see that it failed last time, and it's precisely because of this. This is to show you me altering this directly, the test specification directly within Xray, and having my test environment or my CI/CD environment execute this. So I'm just going to correct that. Okay. We have a steps library also for Gherkin, so that your users won't be creating new steps that have not been created in the past. I'm just going to save that. Okay. And if I go back into my Jenkins environment here, and I have so many jobs and I'm starting to get lost. I should clean this up. I think it's this one nonetheless. And I'm going to execute this. So what it's doing, it's pulling the feature file, the specification from Xray. It's running that feature file against the code that it has. If it finds matching, let's just see what the results are. Everything's fine, and it created a 227 execution here. So if I go back into my BDD, and as you can see, this was my latest run, I'm just going to refresh this. Okay. I will see now that my test as passed. It was executed just now. I'm also the administrator. It's my own instance. And if I look at the execution details, I will see here that, by the way, this is what you see for manual and automated tests. I will see that scroll down, I see the specification, because this way I can see that what was in fact being tested, and I also see the different steps, what has passed, what does, well, in this case everything has passed. So let me just go back to that test and show you the previous one, which I had run beforehand, and we will see here that this one did not pass. And why? Because here is the specification used at the time where I had the 0, and this step failed, and it will show me this is being pushed in everything in the file that is being exported from, and it's telling me that I was expecting 0 because that's what I specified, but the code pushed back or resulted in 7, which is actually the correct result. 3 plus 4 does equal 7. Okay, so let me go back into presentation here. And I did show you the 2 tests, the cucumber and the robot being used. We do support out of the box many other formats. Even if we do not support a specific format that you're using, you can do one of the following. Either convert it into one of these formats, or use our own JSON format that we provide for you. And once you do that, it will require some conversion work, of course, from your side, but I'm sure that Matrix can also aid you with that. And you push the results into Xray, and Xray will be able to ingest this for you. Okay, now interacting with Xray, and I forgot to show you the other part. I did show you this part here, which is using the plugins. Aside from the plugins, we also have a full REST API. You can check out our documentation here, because I will certainly not go into all the details here. You can certainly see the online documentation where we're preparing. This is in evolving. Everything will be seen as we see it here, where we have the new format, interactive format for the REST API, but there are still some lacking here. And these are also available on our previous version of the documentation, where you see this full of examples on how to use this and so forth. And I'm kind of falling behind schedule, so let me move ahead a bit more quickly. Okay, there we go. And I did not show you other plugins for Jenkins, such as the pre-build, in this case for the BDD test. I was actually pulling in all the tests that belong to a specific filter, which I created within Xray itself. Okay. Let's have a look at reporting. I know that Matrix asked me to also ask us to also provide a bit more information about the traceability report, and we will certainly do that. Xray out of the box provides you with 6 what I call operational reports, overall requirements, historical traceability test plans, and so forth. This is new. It is not yet available for server, so I won't be able to show you, but it is already available for the cloud version. For server, it will be available in version 4.1, which is due out later in July. And it will, while these are operational reports, the document generator, you're able to create your own templates to report these, to create these documents in the specified with a format that you want, with just the information that you want. And these are very handy if you especially want to provide these to either upper management or even to customers who do not have, or people that do not have access to Jira itself, because for these operational reports, you do need access to Jira. So if I switch back into Xray here, and I'll just use anyone and look at reports. First of all, overall requirements, you can filter these. I'm not going to filter anything at the time being. Don't have too many results anyway. But what I'm going to show you here is maybe group this according to priority, for example. I do see here that I have 4 requirements which I've considered critical. 2 have passed, 1 has failed, and 1 is even uncovered. Maybe that's what I want. I could certainly click there and see which one it is. As we can see, we have no tests associated. This one that is failing, why it is failing, well, I have 3 tests, but only 2 tests have passed, so we have a completeness of 2/3. Let me show you the traceability report, which is actually one of my favorite reports. And we can even see what we did just a moment ago. So this was the test. By the way, the columns are requirement tests, test runs, and defects. This was the requirement that we were testing. I did run, I think it was yesterday, just to show you this, a manual test case where I have to generate a defect. And here I see the traceability from the requirement all the way down to any defects that it has passing through the test. So this manual test for this requirement had this test run, and it also generated or created a defect there. If we scroll down, we will certainly see the tests that we carried out a few moments ago. For example, the robot test that we carried out. There it is, manual test, and it passed now. And also the BDD test that we just execute 5 minutes ago. So this is very useful also. And we have quite a number of other reports if you're also interested in seeing that. Okay, so let me go back to the PowerPoint here and really pressed for time. So best practices in scaling. Now, here I have a couple of links that you can certainly follow in our site. We have a blog with a lot of useful information. I've picked out 2 articles here where I'm just going through the contents here, especially one related to best practices. It will show you how to engineer and foolproof testing your test environment. One of the most important things is to write clear and concise, correct requirements that will lead to useful tests or meaningful tests. If I have a very broad requirement, then either I have to write 100,000 tests to test that requirement and cover everything that it seems to be specifying, or I'm going to have a deficient testing system where I really don't know what to test. So everything starts off with good requirements, concrete, precise requirements. And then what makes great testing? By the way, coming back to this previous one, we've encountered some strange situations, for example, where we had a company that had one requirement which had 3,000 tests. Well, this just means that the requirement is too broad and it doesn't make much sense. And these were not unit tests, because we could even understand if they were just unit tests looking at specific things, we could understand those tests. But you should only create tests, or at least manage tests within Xray, if they are being used to look at the requirement coverage. So if the tests are not meaningful for that, if you're just testing out a function, there's no use in having it tracked in Xray. So these are some of the useful things and practices when designing tests. We also noticed one test case in particular where we weren't able to create this in Xray, so they had to break this down. We had a test case which had over 10,000 manual steps. Now, even I was looking at that, and I couldn't even understand it was in Excel, and I couldn't even understand that. So the first thing is, you have to keep everything contained. So these are some of the best practices, and you will certainly learn a lot more by consulting these articles that were carefully written out for you. Other things such as scaling. We have also an article that you will be able to see for fine-tuning your Jira instance. Remember that you can create workflows. Workflows should match and mimic the processes that you have or that you want to implement within your testing or QA system. So if you have a very complex process of testing, then your workflow will also show that. but we've noticed that the more complex it is, and sometimes it seems useless to even say this because some people consider this almost offensive. Complex processes maybe sometimes are there to keep some jobs and some people working. They can really be simplified. So keep these as simple as possible. You'll also find some great tips on optimizing your CI or CI/CD environments, what to do, how many tests you should run, how to run them, what should be run, and so forth. And then even things such as managing the JQL functions that you can use, and also refining your reporting so that it is not looking or doing full table scans in all the test results or coverage to calculate coverage and so forth. Okay. One other thing before we get into the Q&A session, and hopefully this was useful for you, I'd also like to mention that we also have a free exploratory application. You can run this without Xray. There's no need to it. Please do I'll have the link further on. You can have a look at it, use it at your free will, no charges whatsoever, but the full power of it really comes to play when you integrate it with Xray. It will create generic tests, as I stated, so you can use this exploratory testing application. It will create the test executions for you, and you can have a test case or a requirement which has its automated tests, but it may also have a couple of manual tests and also an exploratory testing session where, as long as the scenario is well defined, there's a lot to explore here. This is looking for the unknown, because remember, automation is automating something you know. Exploratory testing is looking for something you do not know. And we found many tests that run perfectly automated, but if you are manually looking at this and doing exploratory testing on it, you find defects on this, okay? And just a bit about Expand IT. We have over 5,000 customers, 4.5 million active users. We rely a lot on partners such as Matrix to provide professional services and customizations, and even training for this. Be sure to contact Matrix regarding that. And basically, that's it. I'm here for Q&A, and please feel, I'm just looking for the Q&A session. I'll have to look for it.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather, for this very interesting demo. So this is time for the Q&A. I can see you already got some questions in our panel.
Yes, it's side loaded here, so let me just try to load it in a place where I can see it correctly.
Sure, and meantime, I will say to everyone that obviously we will not have enough time to review all of these questions, so we will take the time and effort to go over them and send you answers offline as we usually do.
Okay. Here's a question. When you ran the automated tests, you showed that the new execution was created in Xray. Why is that necessary? Why not just use the same one over and over? Okay, that's actually a good question. That's two questions in one. An execution is created because we can specify special conditions for the tests that are being executed within that execution, or test runs within that execution. That execution, I can state that it is testing a specific environment, or that it is being assigned to a specific user, or even that it is looking at a specific version. So I can certainly reuse executions if you want. Well, maybe if I show you, could be helpful. So if I go back in here and look at any of these executions, for example, let me look at the manual test here and look at this specific execution. Okay, so we add this execution, and if I create more tests, they will be using the same properties that I have for this execution. Now this is execution 200. So if I come back in here and even use the same one, the cucumber. But actually, let me use the other one. Let's see, this one takes longer to run. So if I look at my robot framework here and look at configuration, I can certainly specify if I want, it was 200, I believe. I can certainly say this. So all of a sudden I'm specifying that I want this to always be pushed into execution 200. So if I run this now, I'm not going to minimize the screen so that we can see it popping up. But nonetheless, I've run this and I've actually had probably have something created and able to confirm result upload because, okay, I didn't put the right one in anyway. But nonetheless, you can specify directly which executions you want to associate this. What happens is that if I ran this test several times for the same execution, what would happen is the test would be, the execution would be replaced. So I have a test execution, and then I have a test run within that execution. And if I run the same test several times using the same execution, that same run will be substituted by the latest one. I do have historical, so it is Xray, so I will be able to see that I'm looking at several executions that have been replaced by this particular one. What happens in Xray is you can actually block it. So if I go into a specific execution, I would wish that would import failed, and doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. So what we can do here is we can see a specific execution, and I can even block. Oh, I know why this. Okay, let me reopen this. And I actually showed you what I was going to say. Since I did have this particular execution closed, I'm unable to modify it. Well, I am because I'm administrator. So when I try to push the results in, this is why does not exist. Book 200, no, I did specify anything here, but let me check again and configure the right thing. So book 200, yes it did, but let me check it again. Just run it again, okay, since I've opened it up. If not, I think you get the idea. You can certainly have a test execution closed, and this way will prevent anybody else from altering that. That's still an error, so I probably typed something in wrongly there, but nonetheless, I think you get the picture. Okay, hopefully I answered your question there. Can you show us? Yes.
Hi, sorry to bother you. Please answer the last question as we are actually running out of time.
Okay.
And the rest of the questions, we will send to everybody the questions, and we will also send them the first link for the test management, the ones that didn't came up to the first webinar, and this webinar will also be sending to you guys and answers to your questions. Okay. So
okay.
Finish with
then I will answer a very simple one then here, because it will be fast, which is what are the prices for the tools and training and the maintenance and support? Well, first of all, you can certainly check that in the Atlassian maintenance and support as well. But for training and professional services, I stated, this is probably a question that came up before, even I mentioned, we do not provide that. We rely on our partners to do that. So this is where Matrix comes in, and we're very happy with the solutions that they provide, the added value that they provide to Xray. So I'll end it with that statement then. Okay.
Let me try to help you with that question, please. We are Enterprise Platinum Solution Partner. We're the largest Atlassian reseller in Israel, and we also have 25 people who are experting. Not everybody are in test management and in automation, but we know the Atlassian tools and marketplace. So we have our own SLA for customers who wishes to have an SLA not only for Xray, but also for Jira, Confluence, and other, of course, Bitbucket and other tools. If it's product from Atlassian or add-ons. So we have our own support, but usually when you buy an add-on or product from Atlassian, you have their SLA, Atlassian SLA. You can go to their site and actually download their Atlassian SLA. There are 3 levels of SLA for Atlassian. One is the regular one when you are buying their products. The other one is called Premier Support, which is also support, but in more high volume in means of SLA. They have their own dedicated support team. And the higher rank of their Atlassian SLA is TAM, Technical Account Manager. But I must say it's very expensive, and they're only focusing on one product. So if you want to have the TAM for a lot of tools for Atlassian, it will be very expensive. It could come up to hundreds or thousands of dollars for each product. We recommend you guys to work with us, and we also have direct contact to Xray. I must say that their support, although they are not a big company, they sit in Lisbon, and their hours are similar than our timelines, and we know them quite well. So we have their support if something is very complicated to us. We actually use them, and they're really helpful. Today we have more than 10 customers. I think it's around 15. We use this Xray, and it's growing. We're not the only partner in Israel, so I know dozens of customers are using Xray, and it's very popular. So, Helder, if we're okay with you, I want to thank also Aya. Aya is not here now; she had to go to another meeting, and I hope to see you, everybody. See you physically, maybe Sunday. All right. So, thank you very much.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Hopefully it was helpful. Good. Thanks a lot for
Thank
the
you,
opportunity
Bye-bye.
also. Okay, bye-bye.